Today we are in part 3 of our series, Parenting in the 21st Century. And the applications in this series have absolutely been targeting parents who are raising children. But as we've seen through the series, the principles behind the applications really can apply to any one of our relationships. Now, today's topic seems like one that only applies to parents, but when you understand the principle, it actually applies to all of our relationships, even though today we're talking about discipline. Discipline is something that every child requires. If children did not require discipline, they would all be born with wisdom, knowing the right things to do, and they wouldn't really need parents at that point. But the reality is, wisdom is something that must be taught to children. In fact, today we're going to see that discipline is critical for the emotional and spiritual health of both the child and the parent. And we're going to see how to approach discipline in a way that is healthy for the emotional and spiritual health of both the child and the parent. Now, for some of you, I've already lost you because that phrase sounds so wrong and you don't know what in the world or how in the world discipline can lead to a healthy spiritual and emotional inner life for a child. And the reason why is, for many of us, we associate the word discipline with punishment. But what's interesting is that the biblical authors don't conflate those two ideas. In fact, when the biblical authors talk about discipline, especially when disciplining children, well, here's what they're talking about. Let me read Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. So start children off in the way they should go. The purpose of discipline is about the way. It's about the path through life. Discipline is there to help children find and run down the correct and wise path through life. Because again, children aren't going to find it naturally on their own. We need to be shown the path through discipline. Now, what this means is that discipline has to do with the principle of the path. It's this idea that you see woven throughout scriptures, and it's simply that whatever path you're on in life, if you look down the road, it has a pretty predictable destination. For example, if someone were to disclose their entire financial world to you, everything they make and what happens to every single dollar they make and where it goes, you could predict pretty accurately what their financial world will look like in 20 years. If someone were to show you everything they eat in the course of a week, they just document everything that goes into their mouth and they just let you see all of it, you could probably predict pretty accurately what their health will look like 20 years down the road. If you were to describe exactly how much time you spend every day and how you approach seeking God's presence daily, I can predict pretty accurately what emotions will dominate your inner life 20 years down the road. And if someone could set up cameras in your home and watch how you approach discipline with your children, we can probably predict what way your children will go down and how your relationship will look with your child 20 years in the future. But Solomon wrote in the book of Proverbs, start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Or, to quote the great Navy SEAL theologian Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom. You see, it is the embrace of discipline, it is the embrace of restriction that actually leads to maximum freedom in life. For example, if there's a person who refuses financial discipline, pretty soon they are going to lose all of their financial freedom. If there is a person in life who gives away their discipline when it comes to work ethic, pretty soon they're going to lose freedom to have a variety of careers. Discipline is critical for our future, for our emotional and spiritual well-being, because it's discipline that equals and leads to freedom. So when I talk about discipline, the goal is not to punish children. That's not the goal of the biblical authors. Effective parents know. Effective parents know that the goal of discipline is to show children the path to healthy relationships with people and with God. Let me say that again. Effective parents know, wise parents know that the purpose of discipline is to show children the path to healthy relationships with other people and with God. Now, before we get to the Bible today, I want to give you kind of a framework on how a parent's approach to discipline has to change from season to season of development. And if we miss this, we're going to take the wrong approach to discipline in a certain season of life. So I'm going to break this up into 5 stages of development in the lives of children, and whatever stage they're at shapes the approach you should take to children. So the first stage of life is the connection stage. From age 0 to 1, the goal of the parent is to connect with their child, that the infant would know, my mom and dad are there for me. They meet my needs. I am connected to them. I can trust them. Mom and dad are there for me. There's no discipline happening during this stage. It's just the connection phase. But the second stage brings in the discipline years. And this is about age 1 to 5. And in the discipline years, the purpose is to teach children that we live in a world of cause and effect, that we live in a world where the law of harvest is in play, that you reap what you sow. This is the stage where wise parents teach children that there's a connection between sin and consequences. And when you sin, that always brings negative consequences into your life. So the focus on this season is on what, not why. What the family values and principles are, and the behaviors that violate those family values and principles. We live in a world where you reap what we sow. The third stage of discipline comes in the training years. This is from age about 5 to 12. This is the stage where we start to add why to the what. This is where we explain what's behind those values and what's behind those things that matter in this family. Because before that age, they're too young. In this stage, they can start to understand why behind the what. And then finally, in stage 4 come the coaching years. And this is age 12 through 18. And this is when a parent really is more on the sidelines, starting to coach their kids through life and think through things before they happen and allow their children to start making decisions on their own while the consequences are very small. If children don't know how to learn or don't learn how to make decisions and get the benefits or negative consequences of those decisions while they're at this stage, they're not going to learn to do it until the stakes are much higher in their 20s or 30s. So you should probably start letting kids in this stage make more decisions than you might be comfortable with so they can learn wisdom. Now, let me give you an example of how this works. In the discipline years, we focus on what? So when a parent is with a child in a parking lot, the what is you have to hold mommy's hand in every parking lot no matter what. And if the child chooses to violate that boundary, that there are consequences. We're focusing on the what. Then when you get into the training years, you can explain why it's important to be aware of your surroundings, because the world is a dangerous place. And then in the coaching years, you can start to look at life with your child and say, now, why is it important to pay attention to your surroundings when you drive, and kind of coach them through that. So our approach changes at each and every season. And then finally, the final stage of parenting is over the age of 18, and those are the friendship years. And if a parent has handled the connecting and disciplining and training and coaching years in the proper sequence, the friendship years come then, and they begin to relate more as peers. Now, a mistake parents make, they make a few mistakes, and I've seen this, especially when I used to be in youth ministry as a pastor. The first mistake is that parents skip the discipline years and then try to begin discipline when they should be focusing on training or coaching. And especially parents who wait until their kids are teenagers to start disciplining, it's over by that season. You missed the window, and those are going to be some brutal teenage years for both the child and the parent. So don't skip the discipline years right out of the gate. That's a critical season. And the other mistake parents make is to bring the friendship years in too soon. Your goal is not to be friends with your toddler. It's to be a parent, a loving parent to your toddler. The goal is not to be friends with your middle school student or your high school student. It is to be a loving parent for them at that season of life. They are in this order for a very important reason. Now, that's just a framework, something to get a handle on as we approach today's topic of discipline. Now, when I approached this as a dad, when Kathy and I had our kids, I thought the discipline years will be easy. It'll be pretty simple because I'm a pretty logical guy. So we'll just make rules. And if our kids choose to violate any of those rules, I don't have to get mad. I don't have to get upset. I can simply enforce whatever consequences in place for that rule. And then we had 3 boys, and my plan kind of blew up. So I walk into the living room one day, and one of my kids is jumping on the couch. So I say, kids, new rule, no jumping on the couch. Done. Easy, not a problem. But then I walk into the living room another time, and my kid is standing on the couch bouncing. And I said, hey, no jumping on the couch. And he said, Dad, I'm not jumping. My feet aren't leaving the couch. I'm just standing and bouncing. Okay, no standing on the couch. New rule, everyone, no standing on the couch. Easy. I come back in the living room another time. Now the kid is on his knees, jumping on the couch, on his knees. And I said, we're not supposed to jump on the couch. I'm not, Dad. I'm kneeing on the couch. Okay, kids, no feet, no knees, no anything on the couches. Only your butt goes on the couch. So I come into the living room another time, and my kid is jumping as high as he can and landing on his butt on the couch and doing it over and over and over and over and over again. I said, what are you doing? He said, Dad, I'm not jumping on the couch. I'm doing butt busters on the couch. Now, I realized that this approach to parenting wasn't going to work on the day that there was a pet frog that a boy had caught outside and decided to keep in the cereal box so he would have plenty of food. And it suddenly dawned on me, raising 3 boys, I can't make rules fast enough to keep 3 boys in line. There are not enough words in the English language to make enough rules to keep 3 boys in line. And I realized I need an entirely different approach to raising kids that isn't about making rules. And besides, if you raise kids in an environment where it's all about rules and follow the rules, that's how you push kids away as they move through the different season. So how do we approach discipline in a way that is wise and gets children on a wise path through life that leads to healthy relationships with other people and with God? To answer that question today, we're going back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Last week I said this is the love chapter of the Bible. We often hear it read at weddings, but in reality and context, it's not about a love between a man and a woman. It's about how we take what God has given to us, and use it to serve and bless other people. So if parents are going to love their children, to serve and bless their children, this is the quality of love that we need in our parent-child relationship. And in this section, Paul teaches us that there's something way better than a rules-based approach to parenting. There's a new value that, if it's implemented, will virtually erode the need for rules in your home. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. Love is patient. That's as far as we got last week. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. And here it is. It does not dishonor others. Love honors others. And if you can discipline around this value of honor, how do we train our children to honor people, to honor their parents, to honor their teachers, to honor their siblings, to honor their peers? If you can instill the value of honor in the lives and hearts of your children, you will almost eliminate the need for rules in your home. Now, to help us get a handle on this idea, I'm going to turn it over to Andy at North Point. We'll hear from him for a few minutes, and then I'll be back to wrap things up.
Before we wrap up, I want to get really practical. If you choose, and I hope you will, if you choose kindness and honor as centerpieces for your home, then any behavior that's dishonoring requires a response. It requires disciplining. Now, in our family, for us, dishonoring behavior was anything that we referred to as one of the 3 Ds. These were the 3 Ds: dishonesty, disrespect, and disobedience. Anytime there was dishonesty, disrespect, or disobedience, we disciplined for these 3 things. Now, childish behavior, that was different. We corrected for childish behavior because we have to teach our kids and coach our kids, but we disciplined for the 3 Ds. So, if you choose kindness and honor as centerpieces for your family, then any behavior that's dishonoring requires discipline. You can't ignore it. Ignoring it rewards it. And what's rewarded is repeated. What's rewarded is repeated. So if you want to raise dishonest, disrespectful kids, just ignore it when you see it. That's really all it takes. Nature will take it from there. But if you don't want dishonest, disrespectful kids, you have to discipline for it. But here's the thing. For the discipline to be effective, not just scary and not just something to be avoided, for discipline to be effective, the discipline must directly address the fact that a relationship has been damaged. In other words, there has to be a correlation, and maybe a question will help explain this. If dishonoring behavior, think about it this way. If dishonoring behavior breaks or undermines a relationship, remember lying, I don't want you to lie because lying breaks the relationship. If dishonoring behavior breaks or undermines a relationship, what should the goal of your discipline be? I want you to think about this. If the fundamental problem with dishonesty and disrespect or disobedience is that it disrupts or undermines the relationship between you and your children, or maybe between your children and someone else, if the real issue, and it is, if the real issue is a break in trust, a break in the relationship, what should the goal of your discipline be? When we discipline our children, what should we be trying to accomplish? Now, again, I've been doing this a long time. I spent many, many years working with middle school and high school parents, and here's what I observed. For many parents, and I understand this, for many parents, there's not really a goal. But if there's not a goal in your discipline, then it's not really discipline. It's just punishment. Because discipline makes a person better. This is why we all wish we were more disciplined. But punishment rarely makes anybody better. Punishment just makes people careful so they don't get caught next time. It doesn't make us better, but it certainly has the potential to make us bitter, right? And here's why, because the message of punishment is this: if you don't obey me, bad things will happen to you. And when you think about most of the punishment that goes on in most homes, assuming it's going on, it's really little more than payback. You did something bad, so I'll do something bad to you. You inconvenienced me or you embarrassed me, so I'm going to inconvenience and I'm going to embarrass you. So again, if dishonoring behavior breaks or undermines the relationship, think about it, then what should the goal of your discipline be? And the answer is restoration of the relationship. The goal of discipline is restoration of the relationship. If disobedience, disrespect, dishonesty damage the relationship with you or anyone else, the discipline should facilitate restoring the relationship. So here's the takeaway. Discipline your children in the direction of relationship restoration. And the sooner you start, the better, because relationship restoration is something that must be taught. We don't come into the world understanding how to do this. And in fact, let's face it, you know some adults who've never figured this out. Perhaps you've never figured this out. If you've ever said, I don't know why you're still upset. I said I was sorry. If you have ever said this or anything like this, perhaps you've never learned the art of restoring a relationship. I don't know why you're still upset. I said I was sorry. You know what the implication is? The implication is, doesn't saying sorry restore the relationship? I mean, doesn't saying sorry get us back to where we were before? No. In fact, in some cases, simply saying you're sorry is insulting. It communicates, something must be wrong with you if you're still not okay after I said I was sorry. Now, the fact that so many parents don't understand this explains, honestly, I think why so many parents are so ineffective with their discipline. They punish. It's just a standalone event. There's no goal and there's no lasting outcome, and nobody is better and nobody is better off. And I think, too, it's why there's such little creativity in parental discipline. Parents just take things away. Maybe this is your habit. They put their kids in timeout. When they're older, they just put them on restriction and ground them. None of which has anything to do with restoring a broken relationship. Jimmy mouthed off to me, so I took his PlayStation away for a week. Really? Well, how's the relationship going? Well, he hates me. Taking stuff away should be a last resort because nobody learns anything. They just try harder not to get caught next time. Now, if you're tracking along with me, you may be thinking, and I hope you're thinking, okay, Andy, I get it, but how? What does it look like? What do I do? And I'm going to give you 2 examples in a minute. But here's the thing. You are smart enough to figure this out. Once you recognize, and this is so important, this is important in your marriage, this is important raising your kids, this is important for your kids to understand, this is important in every relationship. At the heart of every transgression is a damaged relationship. At the heart of every transgression, I know this is kind of, a big, somewhat of a Bible word. At the heart of any act of dishonesty or disrespect, at the heart of every transgression, something hasn't just happened. At the heart, at the epicenter of what happened is a damaged relationship. Consequently, the discipline must in some way restore the relationship. Otherwise, it's not discipline. It's just behavior modification. If it involves someone outside your family, the relationship may never be completely restored because the other party may not be interested in having a relationship with you or your kids. But even in a situation like that, you still need to coach your kids in the art. It is an art of building a relational bridge, especially if they participated in tearing it down to begin with. Now, this really is not as difficult as it may seem. In fact, as soon as your kids could talk, you probably taught them to apologize. I mean, I certainly hope so. An apology is part of relationship restoration. Here's a little tip on apologies. Require your children to apologize in complete sentences. Sorry is not a complete sentence. Sorry is a sorry excuse for an apology. They've got to own it, so they need a pronoun. I'm sorry. I said this so many times to our kids growing up, especially when I forced them to apologize to each other. All right, tell her you're sorry. Sorry. No. We need a pronoun. I'm sorry. You've got to own it. And of course, you look them right in the eye. I bet you've taught your kids that. But here's the thing. Our kids need to understand, and regardless of how old your kids are, they need to understand that when they're dishonest or disrespectful, they've taken something away from the other person. And consequently, because they've taken something away, they owe that person something. This is why we say you owe them an apology. But in most cases, we owe them more than an apology. So here's what I want to suggest you teach your kids to say. And if you don't like my version of this, come up with your own. Here's what you teach them to say. You teach them to say, I'm sorry, and then of course they need to explain exactly what they're sorry for. You got to make them say it so they can own it. I'm sorry I disobeyed you. I'm sorry I kicked over your blocks. I'm sorry I came home late. I'm sorry I didn't answer when you call, whatever it is. I'm sorry, right? And then add this. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? Now let me just warn you. they're going to hate this part. They're going to hate this. But I'm telling you, this is how you help your children understand that they took something and they owe something. They took something and they owe something. What can I do to make it up to you? And when you teach them to think this way, you're laying the groundwork for restoration and restitution. Sometimes it's appropriate to ask someone for forgiveness, but honestly, sometimes it's not. And we will save a discussion on that for another time. Couple of illustrations. When our boys were around 8 and 10 years old, Sandra and I came home from a date and discovered that they had been extremely disrespectful to the babysitter. I mean, it was a nightmare. And this is somebody we'd known for a long time, and she was hesitant to complain, but she did, and we were so glad she did. And she needed to. When we got home, the boys were asleep, so we didn't wake them up. But the next morning, Sandra woke them up, sent them to their little desk, and had them write an apology note to Pam. Each one wrote an apology note. But that was just the beginning. When they finished, Sandra read over the notes to make sure they were fine. Then she told them to get dressed up a little bit, get their little wallets, and get some money out of their savings jar and meet her in the car. And they had no idea what was going on, and she did not tell them until everybody was buckled up and they were driving down the driveway. And then she laid out the game plan. She said, boys, we are going to Kroger, and you're going to go inside, and you're going to buy Pam flowers with your own money. And then we're going to drive to Pam's office, and you're going to deliver the flowers and the notes, and you're going to apologize. And they were mortified. Honestly, they would have preferred that we take away everything in their rooms for an indefinite period of time. And not to mention, they hated wasting their money on flowers. They were humiliated. They were shamed. It was perfect. And here's the other thing. Pam didn't know they were coming. So picture this, and neither did the other people in her office. So imagine it. Here they walk in, and here's Sandra and these two little boys with these flowers and an envelope, and they make their way to her office. And of course, she was in tears, and Sandra was standing behind them. They'd rehearsed in the car exactly what they're going to say. They're not just going to say sorry. They're going to say, I'm sorry. And then they are going to elaborate on exactly what they were sorry for. It was wonderful. It was terrible. It was perfect. But when all was said and done, and when all was said and paid for, the relationship was restored. Sandra disciplined them in the direction of relationship restoration. Now, granted, because I know what some of you moms are thinking, that took a lot of time. Of course it did. It was time consuming. It required some creativity. But it was discipline. It wasn't just punishment. It was a means to an end. They were better for it. Years later, the boys are old enough to drive, and one of our sons was extremely disrespectful to Sandra. Remember rule number 1, honor your mother. I wasn't there when it happened, but when I found out, I was furious. I was so mad, but I knew, he's 16 years old, just, taking stuff away, that's not going to accomplish anything. It doesn't restore anything. And an apology wasn't enough. She was really hurt, and understandably so. This required something big, and this required something memorable. So after I calmed down, and earlier in this message, I said, don't rush to creating a judgment. Don't rush to creating a discipline, because sometimes you need time. And the reason we're not creative is because we rush. So I gave it some time. He knew he was in trouble. He knew there would be consequences. My kids were accustomed at this point to me dragging this out, no immediate response, to the point that sometimes they thought I forgot, but of course you never forgot. So after I calmed down, I asked the question I want all of us to begin asking. How do I discipline toward restoration? And according to Sandra, what I came up with was my finest parenting moment. I required him to ask his mother out and take his mother out on a date. He would ask her out, he would drive, he would choose the restaurant, it would be somewhere nice, and he would pay for dinner. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you kidding?" And I said, "No." And honestly, I think he was probably tempted to just hand me his keys, but I would not have accepted them. So he took Sandra to dinner, and you can imagine what happened. They talked. They reconnected. I didn't have to ask him to apologize. It happened naturally. And Sandra would tell you, it is one of her most cherished memories. So, you can do this. And you know where I got all this? It's at the center of our faith. For all have sinned and broken their relationship with God. And what did God do? Punish us? No, he didn't have to, because you'll discover this eventually. Sin has a built-in wage. Sin has a built-in payment plan. All sins come prepackaged with a punishment, a consequence. So instead, what did God do? He made the first move to restore us. And then he sent us out into our broken world to restore our broken relationships. The relationships we broke, the ones that we broke through our dishonesty and our disrespect. The relationships we damaged through our impatience and our unkindness, our dishonoring responses and behavior. And he's given us the responsibility of teaching our children how to restore their broken relationships as well.
So God doesn't intend for us to punish our children. He intends for us to teach them how to honor one another and how to honor God, our Creator. Because that's what love looks like. Love does not dishonor others. Love honors people. And when that becomes a value of your parents and the way you approach discipline, that's going to lead to healthy relationships in your family and in the future for your child, healthy relationships with people and with God. That's how you discipline children, to the goal of honoring others. Let's pray. Father, it is challenging when children are misbehaving and we're emotionally invested in them to lose our patience, but give us this wisdom that comes from your word, Father, that we would be people who instill and embody honor in our lives. Give us the wisdom and the guidance to instill this value in our children's life so they can have healthy relationships with people and with you, their Creator, who loves them. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.